At 2:17 on the morning of May 27, 1982, Pascal Duret found a state survey car idling against a wall of concrete that had not been there when he passed the same place after supper. The unfinished Felician Spur lay north of St. Francisville, Louisiana, like a road someone had begun to forget. 2 lanes of pale aggregate climbed from the old highway, crossed a drainage ditch, and stopped before a wooded bluff where trumpet vines hung over rusting barricades. The project had been abandoned for nearly 20 years, but the state had recently returned with orange flags, survey stakes, and talk of completing the 4-lane connection to Baton Rouge. People in town called it the Freeway, usually with the embarrassed affection reserved for an expensive mistake. Pascal had been called from his towing yard by a highway surveyor named Lyle Bannon. The message on the answering machine contained no request, only the sound of an engine running and a man whispering. "I went through it once already." Pascal brought his wrecker alone. The air was heavy enough to make his shirt cling between his shoulder blades. Fog from the low ground crossed the unfinished pavement in strips, leaving the raised lanes dry and the ditches white. The survey car stood with its headlights shining into a concrete embankment beneath the bluff. Its front bumper was almost touching the wall. Both doors were open. No one was inside. He killed the wrecker's engine and listened. At first there were only insects and the slow tick of cooling metal. Then a sound came from beyond the embankment, the hollow repetition of tires crossing expansion joints, although the nearest completed road was half a mile behind him. Pascal took a flashlight and walked around the car. The rear tires had left damp tracks on the concrete. Those tracks did not stop at the vehicle. They continued ahead, passed beneath the front axle, and vanished into the wall. He had worked wrecks on roads that appeared flat until a car rolled away from them. He had seen river fog turn culverts into bridges, and drainage water make pavement look open where it had collapsed. He knew how easily a tired man could give shape to poor light. None of that knowledge prepared him for the draft that touched his face. It came from a narrow arch to the right of the survey car. The opening was high enough for a truck and no wider than 1 lane. Fresh concrete curved around it without a seam. There was no ditch mouth, no maintenance gate, no dark stain to suggest a buried culvert. A clean white centerline began at Pascal's boots and entered the arch. On either side, small amber reflectors glowed in the pavement without receiving light. He raised the flashlight. The beam reached 20 yards, then weakened in a gray distance. The tunnel floor sloped gently downward. Its walls were smooth except for rectangular patches of darker concrete spaced at shoulder height. Water shone on them like breath on glass. "Bannon?" The sound of his voice traveled far beyond the visible length of the tunnel. Another voice returned from ahead, but it did not repeat his question. It said, "Odette Duret." Pascal lowered the flashlight. His mother's name had been spoken carefully, with the first and last names given equal weight, the way a clerk read from a legal form. He stepped backward until his heel struck the survey car. A hand appeared around the curve of the tunnel wall. Lyle Bannon came walking sideways, his back pressed to the concrete, as if the road were trying to pull him forward. He had lost his shoes. His white socks were black at the soles, and 6 funeral gloves hung from one hand. They were old cotton gloves, yellowed at the fingertips, each one made for the right hand. Pascal caught him under the arms. Bannon resisted, not by pushing Pascal away, but by reaching toward the wall. "Don't let it finish," he said. A wet stroke appeared on the nearest dark rectangle. It was black and glossy, thicker than ink, narrower than road paint. The line curved without a visible hand. Pascal watched an O form, then a D, then the small, deliberate loops of the remaining letters. Odette Duret. The name looked exactly like his mother's signature on the check she left beneath the sugar bowl. Another rectangle darkened farther down. Albin Ronce. then Nestor Pruin, Estelle Vire, Garland Moye, Cato Belune. Each name completed itself before the next began. With every final letter, the sound of distant tires grew louder. Bannon made a choking noise and pressed the 6 empty gloves to his chest. "I held the pencil," he said. "But there wasn't a pencil." Pascal dragged him toward the opening. The white centerline under their feet shivered. For one instant, it looked soft, as though it had been painted over water. Headlights appeared deep inside the tunnel, paired and low. They came rapidly, throwing the walls into alternating bands of light and shadow. No engine accompanied them. Pascal pulled Bannon out as the headlights passed through the place where they had been standing. Cold air struck his back. In that passing glare, he saw the tunnel occupied from wall to wall by people in funeral clothes. They sat in invisible automobiles, all facing forward, all holding their hands flat against unseen dashboards. Their mouths moved together as they went by. Then the arch was empty again. Pascal reached the wrecker, forced Bannon into the passenger seat, and started the engine. In the mirror, the tunnel remained open. The 6 names shone along its wall. A 7th dark rectangle had begun to sweat. He drove backward until the front wheels dropped from the unfinished grade. The wrecker bounced, nearly stalled, and caught the old access road. When Pascal looked again, the arch was gone. The survey car stood nose first against unbroken concrete. Dawn came at 5:42. By then, 2 deputies, an ambulance crew, and a highway maintenance foreman were at the site. They found Bannon dehydrated, bruised, and unable to explain why his socks were coated with a black compound used in neither the old nor the new roadwork. They found the 6 gloves in his lap. They found Pascal's tow cable attached to nothing. They did not find a tunnel. The maintenance foreman tapped the embankment with a hammer and called it solid. One deputy suggested that Bannon had driven into the wall, backed away, and panicked. The undamaged front bumper made that unlikely, but not impossible enough for an official report. The other deputy asked Pascal whether he had been drinking. Pascal answered once, and then stopped answering. Before the ambulance left, Bannon seized Pascal's wrist. The road asked who said she agreed, he whispered. I didn't know the answer. It used my hand. Who agreed to what? Bannon looked toward the bluff. His pupils narrowed as though headlights were coming through the concrete. To being spoken for. By 7, Pascal was back at Duray Recovery and Radiator on Ferdinand Street. He washed the wrecker twice. The black dust on the running boards did not dissolve. It gathered in thin curls under the hose and arranged itself along the gutter in 6 short lines. His daughter Aline came through the side door, carrying a paper bag of biscuits. At 17, she had her grandmother's straight posture and Pascal's habit of looking at damaged things from several angles before touching them. You missed breakfast, she said. Grand-mère said you were called out. Pascal turned off the hose with his thumb. Did she sound all right? She sounded like herself. Did she say where she was going? Aline studied him. She's at home. Why? He did not tell her about the name on the wall. He drove the 3 blocks to Odette's house and found every curtain open, though the morning sun had not yet reached the front rooms. Odette Duray sat at the kitchen table in her robe. She was 62, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and stronger than most people guessed from the careful way she moved. For 30 years, she had sewn coffin linings and burial dresses for Vire funeral rooms. She had retired when her eyesight began to cloud, but families still brought her torn veils and old suits before funerals because she knew how cloth should lie on a body that could not help her. Her right hand rested in a bowl of milk. Black letters moved beneath the surface. They were not written on her skin. They hovered a fraction of an inch above it, reversing and straightening as the milk trembled. Pascal saw ODE before Odette snatched her hand free and overturned the bowl. You went out there, she said. He closed the kitchen door. You know where. I know where people have been told not to go. Your name was written in a tunnel. Odette reached for a towel and began drying the table. There is no tunnel. I stood inside it. That does not make it a place. 5 other names were written. Her hand stopped. Pascal recited them. At Father Alban Ronce, she closed her eyes. At Nestor Pruin, she drew a breath. Estelle Vire made her mouth harden. Garland Moy and Cato Belloon brought no visible change at all. Who was she? Pascal asked. Odette looked at him then, and fear moved through her face with the intimacy of an old illness. Do not ask that question near a road. He pulled out a chair. Bannon said the road asked who said she agreed. He was sick. Your name was writing itself in milk. She stood too quickly, and the chair struck the wall. You will keep Aline away from the spur. You will not take a hearse call. You will not tow a funeral car. Not today, not tonight, not until Sunday morning. Why? Because once a funeral vehicle enters that grade, the passage remembers what it was made to carry. Pascal had spent most of his adult life refusing to be frightened by his mother's silences. When he was a boy, she would close shutters during certain processions and would not permit him to step over a painted road line while a coffin was in sight. She had never explained. His father, dead 12 years, had called the habits country superstition and advised Pascal to ignore them. Pascal had done so with the confidence of a child who believed ignorance was freedom. Now Odette crossed to a cabinet above the icebox and removed a cedar sewing box. She placed it on the table but kept both hands on the lid. If the other names have appeared, she said, they will try to destroy the wall before night. What wall? The one they wrote on. You told me there was no tunnel. There was one for 13 days in 1961. It was a temporary passage beneath the new embankment, so walking funerals could still reach Cypress Crossing ground. Garland Moy promised it would remain open until a bridge was built. Then he filled it and had it removed from every plan. Why would a filled tunnel come back? Odette looked at the spilled milk, where the last black curve of her name was fading. Because we left a sentence inside it that no dead person ever spoke. She would say nothing more. Pascal went first to Vire Funeral Rooms. The business occupied a narrow brick building near the courthouse, with green awnings and a side drive polished by decades of hearses. Estelle Vire was in the preparation room office, correcting an obituary with a red pencil. She was 70 and dressed in pearl gray despite the heat. When Pascal told her what he had seen, she listened without interrupting. Your mother has always been impressionable before sunrise, she said. Her name appeared on her hand. People see family handwriting everywhere. Did you sign a wall with her in 1961? Estelle placed the pencil parallel to the blotter. You should ask Odette. Did. Then you know how much she wishes to say. A vehicle starter engaged in the garage. Estelle glanced toward the door. Another starter joined it, then another. 3 hearses sat in the garage, 2 black and 1 dark blue. Their engines turned over one after the other. No keys were in them. Pascal ran through the office. Estelle followed more slowly. All 3 hearses were empty. Their headlights came on together. The garage door was closed, yet each vehicle rolled forward until its front bumper touched the wood. Pascal reached through the open window of the nearest and pulled the handbrake. The lever came up without resistance. In the rearview mirror, 6 people sat in the empty compartment behind him. They were younger versions of the 6 whose names he had seen. He recognized Odette at once. Her hair was black, her face narrow with grief. Beside her sat Father Alban in a plain cassock, Dr. Pruin with a physician's bag on his knees, Garland Moy in work clothes, Cato Belloon wearing a deputy's uniform, and Estelle herself in a white mortuary smock. All 6 held pens. The mirror clouded. A sentence appeared in the fog from left to right. She gave the road freely. Estelle struck the mirror with her red pencil. The glass cracked, and the 6 figures vanished. The hearse engine stopped. For several seconds, neither she nor Pascal spoke. Then Estelle said, "The road was never hers alone." "That sounds like an argument you have rehearsed." It was the only way to bury Evangeline Roan where she had asked to be buried. Pascal felt the name before he understood it. His grandmother's name had been absent from the house where he grew up. There were no photographs of her, no stories, no mention at Christmas or All Souls' Day. He had known Odette's mother died young. He had never known where she was buried. "Evangeline was your mother's mother," Estelle said. "She kept the old burial road. She also made enemies of everyone who tried to improve this parish." "What did she refuse?" Estelle looked at the cracked mirror. "She refused to let the living say improvement when they meant removal." The garage door began to bow inward, although the hearses were no longer touching it. A white line appeared beneath the wood and extended across the floor toward Estelle's shoes. She stepped over it. The line turned 90 degrees and followed her. By noon, the white line had crossed Estelle's office, passed beneath the locked preparation room door, and ended at a stainless steel table where no body lay. Estelle closed the funeral home to the public and told her employees there was a wiring problem. Pascal drove to the parish road office with the cracked mirror wrapped in a blanket. He found Rhea Lenoir in a temporary trailer overlooking the Felician Spur. She was the state materials engineer assigned to determine whether the old grade could support new pavement. She was 36, wore her dark hair cut above the collar, and had the weary directness of someone who had spent 3 weeks explaining concrete to men who preferred rumors. Lyle Bannon had been her surveyor. "I saw the wall," Pascal told her. "I saw an opening in it. I was not drunk, and Bannon did not invent the material on his socks." Rhea unwrapped the mirror. The sentence remained visible in the cracked glass, even though the surface was dry. She read it without touching it. "At first light," she said, "I bored the embankment where Bannon's car was found. The core went through 18 feet of concrete and compacted fill. That matches the old cross-section. So there's no hollow." The drill operator heard one. She opened a steel cabinet and removed a cylindrical concrete core wrapped in brown paper. It was gray, 8 inches long, and marked with the date. A black line ran through its center. The line was too precise to be aggregate or tar. It curved along the exposed surface in a way that suggested part of a letter. Rhea set it beside a second core. Together, the black marks formed the lower half of a word. "Freely." The boring locations were 14 feet apart, she said. "These pieces should never align." Pascal told her the 6 names. She wrote them in a notebook, then checked a stack of property files. "Garland Moy is already demanding we pour a cap over the embankment," she said. Cato Balloon called the district office before 8 and described the whole thing as vandalism. Neither of them asked what was written. They already knew. That is my conclusion. She unfolded the 1961 construction plan. The highway crossed a narrow parcel labeled Rowan Tract. A dashed footpath entered from the east, passed beneath the planned embankment, and continued toward a cemetery symbol in the woods. On the next revision, the path disappeared. The parcel was marked Voluntary Donation. The signature authorizing the transfer belonged to Evangeline Roan. Pascal leaned closer. He had seen enough of his mother's writing to know that the signature was hers. Rhea pointed to a note in the margin. "Temporary pedestrian passage to remain until permanent access is provided." This was struck from the final drawing. Who struck it? The initials are GM. Garland Moy. They drove to Cypress Crossing ground by the old river road. The cemetery lay on a rise beyond a stand of live oaks, enclosed by an iron fence mottled with rust. Its gate faced a path that ended against the freeway embankment. The path was narrow, packed hard by feet rather than wheels. Weeds grew through it, but the center remained visible. A handmade sign beside the gate read, No vehicles beyond this point. An elderly man was trimming grass around the graves with a sling blade. He introduced himself as Bernard Roan, Evangeline's nephew and the last keeper of the Burial Society records. He had Odette's guarded eyes, but none of her reluctance. "The confraternity of the Sixth Mercy walked every coffin here," he said after Pascal explained. "No poor family had to rent a hearse. 6 witnesses went with the dead from the house to this gate. They signed only one statement, that the body was not left alone on the road." "Why 6? Because 1 can lie, 2 can agree to it, and 3 can call it a vote. 6 have to look at one another." Rhea glanced toward the embankment. "What happened at Evangeline's funeral?" Bernard drove the sling blade into the earth. "She was the confraternity keeper. The Freeway men wanted her land. She said a burial road was not hers to sell because the dead had used it before she was born, and the living would need it after she died." Father Rance called that pride. Dr. Proin called it confusion. Moya called it obstruction. Cato Balloon called it trespass. Estelle Weyer called it bad business. And Odette? Odette called it her mother. Bernard led them to a grave beneath a magnolia. The marker was modest and clean. Evangeline Roan, 1902 to 1961. She kept company with the dead. The ground around it was dry, although the grass elsewhere was wet from morning fog. "She is here," Pascal said. "She was buried here," Bernard answered. "That is not always the same as being allowed to arrive." He took them to a small shed behind the cemetery. Inside were folding biers, canvas rain covers, hand lanterns, and ledgers wrapped in waxed cloth. The final ledger ended 3 days before Evangeline's death. A rule was written inside the cover in her hand. "The 6 may witness the road. They may not speak for the dead." The last completed entry described a laborer's funeral in April 1961. 6 signatures followed the statement that his body had remained accompanied from door to grave. On the next page, someone had cut away a rectangle. Bernard said the missing paper had been placed in Evangeline's coffin. She told Odette there was one road no official could close. She meant the duty between a death and a grave. They took her words and made them about concrete. Pascal asked where the temporary tunnel had been. Bernard opened the shed door and pointed to the embankment. "Exactly where the path stops." The afternoon grew hotter. Cicadas filled the cemetery with a single metallic note. Rhea walked the path and measured the distance from the gate to the concrete wall, 186 feet. "How long was the passage?" Pascal asked. Bernard answered, "Long enough for 6 people to decide they were not responsible." That evening, the first funeral notice appeared. It came from the teletype at the local newspaper, though no one had sent it. The editor called Estelle Weyer because the notice named her as the deceased and listed the service for 4:48 the following morning at the west mouth of the road. Before the paper could be stopped, the same notice emerged from the machine again with Odette's name, then Father Albin's, Dr. Proin's, Garland Moy's, and Cato Balloon's. No ages were listed, no relatives. Each notice contained the same sentence: "The witness will arrive before the body." The editor locked the pages in a drawer. At 9, black letters began pressing through the metal from inside. Pascal collected Aline from a friend's house and took her to Odette's. He told them both to stay there. Aline objected until Odette showed her the old right-hand glove she had removed from the cedar box. The glove bore 6 lines of handwriting, 1 on each finger and 1 across the palm. The ink had browned with age. On the thumb, I heard no refusal. Index finger, her mind was unsound. Middle finger, the land was surrendered. Ring finger, her body was received clean. Little finger, the road was lawfully closed. Across the palm, she confessed before death. "Those are the lies?" Aline asked. Odette folded the glove shut. "Those are the pieces. We each took one. Which was yours?" Odette did not answer. Pascal understood. "You wrote the signature on the deed. I wrote what they told me she had agreed to. You knew she had not. I knew they would bury her outside the fence if I refused. Father Alban said a woman who died rejecting the authority of the parish could not be carried through the gate. Estelle had her body. Cato had the road. Garland had men at both ends of the passage. Dr. Pruin had signed a paper saying my mother was not competent. I was 21 years old and carrying you." Pascal sat down. He had been born in November 1961. The date moved through him like a quiet physical blow. All his life, Odette's silence had seemed directed at the dead. Now he saw that it had been built around him. "She did not know about me," Odette said. "I had not told her. I thought if they denied her burial, people would deny me everything else. Work, a home, baptism for you. I signed her name because I was afraid your life would begin under her disgrace. And what did the others sign? Not paper. The wall. Father Alban wrote a confession he said she had spoken. 6 of us signed beneath it before dawn as witnesses. The burial society required 6 names, and they used its custom to make the lie look holy. Why inside the tunnel? Because the church would not receive the coffin until the statement existed, and the state inspector would arrive at sunrise. They needed the funeral finished and the land transferred before either authority could ask questions. Aline looked at the glove. "What happened after you signed?" "We carried her halfway through. Then the lights failed. We heard cars passing inside the walls, though the freeway had never opened. My mother knocked once from inside the coffin." Pascal stared at her. "She was dead," Odette said. "I helped prepare her. I knew she was dead. But she knocked. Everyone heard it. Father Alban said it was the wood settling. Garland ordered us to put the coffin down. We ran out the east side. Estelle's men later took the coffin around by truck and buried her after sunrise. So the 6 witnesses left her alone on the road. Yes. The old rule in the ledger seemed to fill the room. The 6 may witness the road. They may not speak for the dead." Odette held out the glove. "We broke both parts." At 10:30, Father Alban Rance telephoned. He had retired to a small room behind the fictional Church of St. Aura, where another priest cared for him. His voice was thin but precise. "Bring the glove," he said. "Do not bring a vehicle used for funerals." Pascal drove his pickup. Rhea met him at the church with the concrete cores and the 1961 plans. The sanctuary was unlit except for 6 vigil lamps near a side altar. Father Alban sat in a wheelchair beneath a ceiling fan, wearing black trousers and a white undershirt. Without his collar, he looked less like a priest than an old man waiting to be dressed. When Odette's glove was placed in his lap, he touched none of it. "The tunnel has written us," he said. "Why now?" Pascal asked. "Because the state has staked the old road for permanent closure. A funeral vehicle crossed the grade last night. The conditions have met again. What happens to the 6 names?" Father Alban looked at Rhea. "You found the original wall?" "We found writing inside solid concrete. Then the passage is assembling itself. By tomorrow before dawn, it will be complete. And then? It will conduct the funeral we refuse to finish. But there is no coffin now. It will use the witnesses." Rhea set the plan on a pew. "Are you saying 6 people will be killed?" "I am saying the tunnel does not understand the difference between carrying testimony and carrying bodies. We taught it that a witness could replace the dead." Pascal crouched in front of him. "What did Evangeline accuse you of?" Father Alban's face tightened. "She accused me of making burial conditional on obedience. She said no priest should use a gate to obtain words from a dead woman." "Was she right?" "Yes." The answer seemed to surprise even him. He asked Odette to unfold the glove. Each line had grown darker. Beneath the sentence across the palm, another phrase was appearing in smaller letters. "Write only what your hand did." Father Alban read it twice. "The wall will not accept a general apology," he said. The confraternity rule required each witness to account for the road personally. We corrupted that rule. It is requiring the same form in return. "So each of you must write the truth beneath your name," Rhea said. "In the tunnel. Before dawn. Before the first funeral bell." Pascal looked toward the sanctuary. "There are no bells at this church." Father Alban's gaze moved to the 6 vigil lamps. Not a church bell, the sound made when a hearse door closes. As if in answer, a heavy door slammed outside. They went through the vestibule. No vehicle stood in the church lot. Across the street, every parked automobile had opened its rear passenger door. One by one, those doors closed. 6 impacts traveled down the block. The vigil lamps went out. At 11:15, Garland Moy arrived at the Freeway site with a concrete pump, 2 dump trucks, and a crew he had hired from Baton Rouge. He claimed the embankment had become unstable and had to be filled before the state could proceed. Cato Balloon, once a deputy and now president of the Parish Planning Commission, stood beside him with a typed emergency order. Rhea told the crew the site was under state control. Cato smiled without warmth. "The state abandoned it once. We remember how to protect ourselves." He was a thick-bodied man in his early 70s, with white hair cut close and a polished cane he did not need. Pascal had known him all his life as the person who led civic parades and spoke at veterans' funerals. It was difficult to fit that familiar figure inside the tunnel's black handwriting. "You signed Evangeline's false confession," Pascal said. Cato glanced at Odette, who had come despite Pascal's instructions. "I signed a witness statement accepted by the parish and the state," he said. "Your grandmother was buried where she wished. The road served the living." "The road served Garland." Garland Moy climbed down from the pump truck. Age had bent him, but not diminished his voice. "The freeway would have brought work," he said. Evangeline Roan wanted a footpath for coffins more than she wanted a future for children. Odette stepped onto the unfinished pavement. A white line immediately appeared beneath her shoes. It ran toward the embankment. The concrete wall darkened. A vertical seam formed, then the curve of an arch. Fog began to breathe from it, though the night around them was clear. The hired crew moved backward. One man crossed himself. Another abandoned the pump controls. Cato raised the emergency order. "This is projection equipment, chemical paint, a performance." From inside the arch came the sound of a pen scratching over paper. Odette Duray appeared on the wall. The letters were larger than before. Garland ordered the pump operator to start. The man refused. Garland climbed into the cab himself. The machine roared, and a hose as thick as Pascal's arm jerked toward the tunnel. Wet concrete surged from its mouth. Instead of falling, the concrete entered the arch in a smooth horizontal stream. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the pump began drawing material backward. The hopper emptied. The load in the supply truck vanished. Dust, gravel, and gray slurry rushed through the hose into the dark. Garland shut the engine down, but suction continued. The hose flattened, shuddered, and pulled the pump truck several feet across the grade. Pascal and 2 crewmen cut it free with a saw. The severed end struck the pavement. Funeral programs spilled from it. Hundreds of them slid across the freeway in damp white fans. Every program carried Evangeline Roan's name. Inside, beneath the order of service, 6 blank signature lines waited. Cato stared at the papers around his shoes. The tunnel spoke in Evangeline's voice. "Do not write for me." Everyone heard it. The voice came from the damp programs, the cracked hearse mirror, and the undersides of the parked vehicles. It was low, exhausted, and without anger. Garland stepped on the nearest program. The tunnel lengthened. Its far opening drew away until it was no larger than a stamp, and the roadway divided into 6 narrow lanes. Beneath each black name, the wall hollowed into the shape of a seated body. Before midnight, all 6 people named on the wall had gathered at the spur. Dr. Nestor Pruin arrived from the nursing home with an oxygen cylinder. Estelle came in an employee's car. Father Alban was brought in a station wagon, his wheelchair refusing to roll away from the white line. Cato stood beside his trapped cane. Garland remained near the concrete pump, insisting the opening was a manufactured trick even after his own younger face appeared in the cracked hearse mirror. Aline arrived with Bernard Rohan and the page cut from Evangeline's burial ledger. Bernard had found it sewn into an old processional canopy in Odette's attic. When a road is taken, 6 shall stand where it was. Each shall name only his own deed. No word shall be attributed to the dead. No body shall be required to forgive the living. The way shall remain open until the body has passed. At the bottom, Evangeline had written, "A grave is not consent." "The road must be reopened," Ria said. "Confession alone will not satisfy the rule." The old plan showed a maintenance shelf curving around the southern end of the embankment. Brush and a collapsed retaining beam had buried it, and the new survey stakes placed a wall directly across it. Pascal sent Aline, Bernard, and the willing road workers to clear the shelf by hand. No engine would start near the tunnel. At 1 in the morning, headlights began traveling inside the concrete walls. In each passing light, the 6 named people saw themselves laid out for burial. Odette wore Evangeline's dress. Father Alban held a blank card beneath a violet stole. Pruin lay in a paper gown covered with signatures. Estelle's face was sewn beneath unfinished lining cloth. Garland lay under a highway map. Cato's coffin contained only his cane and 6 smiling sets of teeth. The black name, Nestor Pruin, began to run down the wall. Pruin's shadow stretched away from him and seated itself in the waiting hollow. "What did your hand do?" Pascal asked. Pruin stared at the shape in the concrete. "I examined Evangeline 2 days before her death. She was lucid. She knew every boundary and every family that had used the footpath." "Then why did you call her incompetent?" "Because refusal was inconvenient." The words on the glove's index finger, "Her mind was unsound," lifted from the cloth and wrapped around his forefinger. He pressed it to the wall and wrote beneath his name, "I certified confusion where I found refusal." The sentence whitened like a lane marking. His shadow tore free of the recess and returned to his feet. Estelle entered next. The ring finger lie, her body was received clean, circled her wrist. Behind her name, the wall became a preparation room from 1961. Younger Estelle and Odette stood beside Evangeline's body. A canvas pouch lay open on the table, filled with receipts proving that families had donated enough money to preserve the burial road and build the promised bridge. "I removed it from her clothing," Estelle said. "I gave it to Cato because Garland had promised my father a commercial exit beside the funeral home." She wrote, "I removed the proof from the body I had promised to honor." Her funeral image receded. Above them, the ceiling opened into a shaft, where empty burial garments turned slowly, sleeves reaching toward the living. Garland tried to leave. Headlights appeared behind him without a car, casting his shadow toward the tunnel. The shadow walked while he remained still, pulling his body after it. A driverless paving machine emerged from the dark. Funeral cloth covered its roller. Instead of asphalt, it flattened deeds, prayer cards, photographs, and strips of burial fabric into a black road. Among them was the receipt for the cemetery bridge Garland had been paid to construct. "I used the bridge money on the west ramp," he said as the machine approached. "I filled the passage before the inspector returned. I removed the walking road from the final plan." The little finger lie, The road was lawfully closed, coiled around his fist. I closed the road I had been paid to keep open. The paving machine stopped. Its roller split, revealing a narrow funeral aisle. Evangeline sat in the first pew with her back to them, her hands prepared for burial. Pascal took a step toward her. Odette caught his arm. "Do not call her. It will make her answer for us." The figure did not turn. Father Alban wheeled himself beneath his name. The glove's thumb tightened at his throat. I heard no refusal. "I heard her refuse me," he said. She would not call the land transfer just. I made burial conditional on obedience, then called her resistance spiritual confusion. He wrote, "I put my words in the mouth of a woman I would not hear." His seated double appeared, fingers bound by a violet cord. It placed both hands on his head as if blessing him, then broke apart into strips of old cassock cloth. Only Odette and Cato remained. Cato would not touch the glove. "5 statements invalidate the affidavit," he said. "There is no reason to continue." "This is not law," Bernard answered. "It is exactly law without rules." A hollow man stepped from the recess beneath Cato Bellune. Its body was an empty coffin bordered in polished wood. It closed around him, leaving his face visible far inside. The tunnel spoke in Evangeline's voice. "Write for him." The sentence across the glove's palm, "She confessed before death," floated toward Pascal. He understood the offer. He could write Cato's admission, release him, and become the substitute witness. The tunnel had learned the old method well. Replace responsibility with another person's body. Odette stepped between Pascal and the words. "No body shall be required to forgive the living." She reached into the hollow shape and seized Cato's wrist. "You signed first," he gasped. "Tell them it was necessary. I will tell them what I did. You will tell them what you did." Cato's resistance broke not into repentance, but into the knowledge that no one else would carry it. I burned the receipts. I swore the confession was spoken before death. I threatened Bernard's father when he demanded the records. I kept the original affidavit in my cane. Aline pulled the cane from the pavement and unscrewed its silver cap. Inside lay a roll of onion skin paper bearing Evangeline's forged confession and all 6 signatures. Cato pressed the black sentence to the inner wall of his wooden prison. I made 6 fears into a legal voice and burned the answer. The hollow body opened. Cato fell free. His shadow returned facing the wrong direction. Odette approached her name. Her double had no hands, only 2 black signatures extending from its wrists. The middle finger lie. The land was surrendered. Bound her own hands together. The wall showed her at 21, signing Evangeline Rowan on the deed, while Pascal's unworn baptismal gown rested in a cedar box. "I told myself I did it for you," she said to Pascal. "That made you my excuse for 21 years. I feared they would deny her burial, my work, my home, and your baptism. They cornered me, but the hand was mine." She wrote, "I signed my mother's name because I feared the living more than I honored her refusal." The signatures detached from her double's wrists and became 2 black roads, one reaching toward St. Francisville and one toward Cypress Crossing Ground. Where they met, the tunnel floor cracked. Beneath the concrete lay the old burial path, bright as if seen through water. Hundreds of footprints moved along it, 6 beside every coffin wheel. No bodies appeared, only the laboring marks of people who had refused to let the dead travel alone. The 6 truthful sentences whitened on the wall. The 6 names remained. "The way is still broken," Bernard said. Aline's voice came over the field radio from the far side of the embankment. The workers had cleared the southern shelf to the fallen retaining beam. They needed Pascal's wrecker. He opened the truck and found the 6 old funeral gloves laid across the engine, each filled with cemetery soil. Nothing was mechanically wrong, yet the starter would not turn. In the rearview mirror, the tunnel continued through the cab. An empty coffin rested in the truck bed. A seventh dark rectangle waited above it. Odette said, "It is offering you the place of the body. The false deed sheltered the house where I raised you. It considers you part of what I bought with her name." Pascal felt the bargain in the steering wheel. One body could complete the road without requiring 6 old people to carry what they had abandoned. He released the wheel. No body shall be required to forgive the living. The 7th rectangle dried. The wrecker started. Pascal drove around the southern shelf and lowered his cable to the workers. In the mirror, 6 funeral cars followed him, although the path behind was empty. Each carried an open coffin on its roof. The cable tightened. The retaining beam rolled aside, exposing packed earth worn smooth by processions that had ended 21 years earlier. Cold air rushed from the cemetery gate. Every lantern flame leaned toward it. At 3:34, the footpath was open. The phantom tunnel convulsed. Reflectors broke loose and rolled across its floor like luminous teeth. The 6 body-shaped hollows stepped from the walls. Pruin's double carried a death certificate in its open chest. Estelle's wore a burial dress sewn over its face. Garland's mouth was packed with roadstone. Father Alban's hands remained bound. Odette's wrists ended in signatures. Cato's body was a polished emptiness. They advanced on the living 6. The old people could not outrun them. The only direction left was forward. Then Evangeline's coffin appeared beneath the transparent floor. It moved along the old road on 6 invisible shoulders and stopped at the place where the witnesses had abandoned it in 1961. The walls began closing. The body had been buried years ago. What remained was the weight of the duty. Pascal and Rhea found canvas carrying straps among the old confraternity equipment. They placed one across the shoulders of each signatory. Garland protested that his heart would fail. Pruin could barely stand. Father Alban could not walk without Pascal beside him. "No one will take your place," Odette said. The invisible coffin rose. Its weight entered the straps. All 6 bent. Estelle and Odette took the front, Pruin and Alban the middle, Garland and Cato the rear. Pascal steadied Father Alban without taking the strap. Rhea carried Pruin's oxygen. Aline held a lantern ahead of her grandmother. Bernard called the distance to the gate. As they walked, the tunnel opened into 6 possible roads. One ended beneath a completed freeway interchange built over the cemetery. One showed Evangeline buried outside the fence. One showed the witnesses telling the truth in 1961 and losing their offices but preserving the path. One showed them dying peacefully with the lie intact. One showed Pascal in the offered coffin. The last showed Evangeline waiting at the gate with her arms open. Father Alban turned toward her. Odette jerked the strap. "She does not owe us absolution." The welcoming figure opened its mouth into another tunnel. They kept to the center. Phantom traffic passed through their clothes. Funeral passengers reached from the walls, offering blank programs and asking the living to sign. At the place where the coffin had once been set down, one knock sounded beneath the invisible weight. "She was dead," Pascal said. "I know," Odette answered. "A coffin does not need life inside it to carry a refusal." Near the exit, a fresh orange survey stake stood in the path. "Permanent retaining wall. Close access." Rhea pulled it up and broke it across her knee. The 6 crossed the threshold. The names peeled from the tunnel walls, not as letters, but as narrow strips of black roadway impressed with the pressure of 6 hands. They followed the procession outside and laid themselves along the reopened path. At 5:39, the signatories reached Cypress Crossing Gate. The weight left the straps. Garland collapsed, but lived. Pruin sank beside his oxygen cylinder. Father Alban wept. Estelle removed her shoes and placed both feet on the old earth. Cato's reversed shadow slowly turned to align with him. Odette remained standing. A mockingbird called from the magnolia above Evangeline's grave. The tunnel shortened in silence. It carried away the phantom traffic, empty garments, seated doubles, and all 6 false roads. The mouth narrowed to a coffin lid, then to one black line crossing the footpath. At Odette's shoes, the line divided into 6 white marks and continued to the cemetery gate. Dawn reached St. Francisville. No opening remained in the embankment. The state plans still showed none. Yet the southern footpath had hardened overnight into a surface no machine could cut, exactly wide enough for 6 people and a beer. Cato's hidden affidavit invalidated the land donation. Bank records and bridge invoices supported the testimony. Ria's concrete cores still formed the word freely when placed side by side, although they had been drilled 14 feet apart. Her official report did not explain that fact. It concluded only that the southern shelf must remain open for structural reasons. The revived freeway was rerouted west. Garland admitted diverting the bridge money. Before his funeral, his family opened every private road across the remaining Moy land. Pruin corrected his medical statement. Estelle returned the commercial access payment and opened the funeral home records. Father Alban surrendered his honorary titles and asked to be buried without a homily. The younger priest read only Evangeline's rule: "No word shall be attributed to the dead." Cato never explained his shadow. It pointed toward Cypress Crossing ground whenever he stood on pavement, regardless of the sun. Odette testified last. She asked no forgiveness. She told Aline about the coercion, the benefit, and the years when silence became easier than correction. She placed Evangeline's glove, Pascal's baptismal gown, and the affidavit in the Burial Society shed. When she signed her own name, nothing appeared in milk, glass, cloth, or concrete. Rumor turned the event into executions, death predictions, and highway ghosts. Older residents kept the essential part. Before dawn on May 27, 1982, 6 names had been written where no tunnel existed, and every person named had been required to carry the truth farther than fear had carried it. Years later, after Odette died, Pascal walked behind her bier along the narrow path. Aline and her children went ahead. 6 bearers carried the coffin. No official waited at the gate. No statement had been written for the woman beneath the cloth. As they passed the embankment, dew covered the concrete. 6 clear spaces appeared in it, shaped like names, but containing no letters. From within the wall came the soft sound of 6 pens being set down. Then sunlight reached the road, and the spaces dried without being filled.